Welcome back to another episode of Tokyo Recruiter. I'm Levi, your host. Thank you for being here. And today's guest, we have Dan McGrath, who you may have seen on LinkedIn. He's known for his 50 Lunches with 50 Leaders program and his Borat t-shirt. Overall, speaking to him, I was surprised how humble he is and also how hilarious. He's grown a company to 25 people now, and he isn't afraid to switch up the game. In fact, in 2023, he had a come to Jesus moment and he realized that he wanted to do things a little differently. So there's a couple of ways that might be inspiring to you if you're a recruiter that's looking to change things up, just how to do things more creatively and get the results. So if you want to see more about how Dan is building a community in Tokyo, then please check this episode out. All right, enjoy. Good morning, Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Levi. Appreciate the invite. Good to be here.
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to ask you to start it off, what was a challenging time in recruitment and how did you overcome that?
Getting started is always a bit of there's a lot of obstacles in your way. I was no different. I do recall this number sticks in my mind. The first seven offer letters I had all got rejected. Looking back,
Wow.
a lot of amateur mistakes, a lot of lack of coaching on pre-closing and then closing. But like any kind of young rookie in the game, you just sort of, you seek out counsel from senior guys around you, and finally I can kind of crack that first one. But I do recall a lot of dark days going home sort of early on going, what's going on here? How come it's not kind of clicking? So,
Hmm.
yeah, that was sort of a big mental hurdle to sort of overcome early. And thankfully I never had such a rotten run since then. But it's probably good to have a bit of pain on the front end to appreciate the wins when they do start to kind of trickle in.
And how long did it take to make your first placement, if you remember?
Yeah, I think it was about the 5 month mark. Again, memory is a bit hazy. It was quite a while ago, but
Hmm.
yeah, I think it was before the 6 month mark. So I remember I had two back to back 3 month probations, and I was always looking at that marker in time as like, shit, I got to get one across the line here, otherwise, might be having a tough chat with my boss. But yeah, so getting the offers was one thing, but closing them certainly remained a bit of an issue. But once the first one went through, it's been sort of, I won't say smooth sailing ever since, but it's kind of a big mental obstacle or hurdle removed. So, that was certainly challenging, and I'm sure a lot of greenhorn recruiters suffer similar kind of rough starts where there's a lot of self doubt. Yeah, that sort of sticks out early on as a real big challenge I had to overcome.
Nice. And thanks for sharing that. I do think it probably is pretty common. Closing is kind of an art that takes some time as well.
Yeah.
For you getting into recruitment, like you mentioned, what was kind of your impetus or the catalyst for you to join the industry?
Yeah, not too dissimilar to probably a lot of other Japan-based recruiters. It's I was teaching. There's no shame in saying that. I quite enjoyed it, but I just felt the ceiling was always limited. And so I had a friend that I was playing football with, and I just asked him, what do you do? And he said recruitment. I'm like, oh, sounds great. What's that? Anything but sort of teaching sort of seemed appealing. I joined a company called Optia Partners, and yeah, there was an open desk in their pharmaceutical team, and yeah, it just felt right. The two owners of that company are both Australians, and I just felt like a warm kind of glove. It felt like it was a kind of place I could see myself doing well in. But it just felt you can't really go past your gut instinct. I think that's something we always have to continually rely on. And at that time, I didn't know one recruitment company from the next, but it just felt right. Optia Partners at the time, so that was sort of where I made my entry
Hmm.
point.
Excellent. And then what was the inspiration for you're a co-founder of Titan, right?
Yeah, so after Opti, I was there for 7.5 years. Then I moved to another company called Pacific Associates for 2.5 years, and I looked at that as being sort of the place I wanted to plant roots and set up long term. There was a potential equity slice on the table, but after a short while, my mind started wandering about setting up. And at the time, I was 32 at the time, and I had over a decade experience. I guess I thought, well, if I'm not going to do it now, then there's no, might as well just remain kind of under a big corporate sort of setup. So, yeah, I won't say there was a kind of light bulb moment. It was just more, I guess, conviction in, like, I guess, confidence in knowing that I thought I could do it. I had a couple of wonderful partners, co-founders in the business that I could trust and rely on. So, yeah, we launched 10.5 years ago. We've grown from, 5 consultants to 25.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, at a young 32 years old, starting your own company is definitely a big risk, I think, for a lot of people, and especially seeing how far Titan has come. I don't know if you had that vision in your head that it was going to be a 25-person company, or what you were thinking at the time, but
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to give a clever answer here, to be honest, Levi, but the reality is you're so mired in you're in the trenches just trying to build this thing up. You don't really think too long term, and not to discredit companies that have wonderful 5, 10 year business plans, but we were all kind of billers because we needed to kind of really generate that early cash flow. So we was just so kind of embroiled or just in heads in the game and just building and just making sure it wasn't going to be a failure. You know, most companies within the first 2 years that tend to flop in recruitment circles, especially in
mm,
a market that you're not from. So I think we were just so kind of determined, hard-headed, and just like that failure wasn't really an option. And we're not
mm,
there yet by any means, but we've certainly come a
mhm.
long way, and yeah, quite proud of the journey.
Nice. It certainly seems like it. And I'm curious in terms of where you've taken the company and maybe also the vision. What are you guys doing that is unique in Tokyo?
Um, I like to think we treat our employees like adults. What I mean by that is there's a lot of companies get a tough rap for being KPI driven and whatnot. I think that we tend to look at results and then work our way back from that. If the results aren't coming in, we look at the reasons why, and then we try to support our guys to lead them to success. So we haven't really needed to grow or expand unless we sort of come across the right person to kind of plug in. Um, we've got quite a lot of guys that have also been with us a significant period of time.
Mm,
And I guess another critical thing that's allowed us to kind of expand has been that we started off as, purely based in pharmaceutical and med device. And I think our mentality from day one was always kind of inch wide, mile deep. We don't recruit roles in APAC. We only recruit purely in Japan. And that was sort of our one wood kind of terms, Japan pharma or Japan healthcare was all we wanted to be known for. But then we had the opportunity to kind of grow from that. So two of our top guys that had sort of been raised under our roof, they wanted a little bit more elbow space or room to grow in their own kind of leadership journey. So one of our top billers in pharma, he wanted to do a bit more on the digital side or commercial space in pharma. So Anthony created Titan Business Innovation, and that's allowed us to then break away a little bit from pure sort of pharma. So he's built that out to sort of 6 consultants. And then Andy, um, he was our top guy in med device for a number of years, and he drew a lot of inspiration from his trail running on weekends, and then wanted to pivot and work in an industry he had a passion for. So he launched our green tech business line, focusing on clean tech and renewables, and they've done amazingly well also. And they've grown now to 7 consultants as well. So, yeah, very proud of those two guys. Wanted to remain with us under the Titan roof. Wanted a bit more space to do their own things.
it's interesting to see that they didn't just start their own company. Like they wanted to remain under the Titan wing, and that probably, reflects well on the culture that they wanted to be close and in the same building as they're building out their own new thing. So I think that's quite
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of unique, I guess. We had the bandwidth to cater or to kind of help them launch their businesses, all those
Mm,
lines. They're the face and the name of their business. People don't associate Dan, Tyler, or William with Green Tech. It's Andy's, and it's likewise with Anthony in business innovation. Anything we can do to help, I know, remove some obstacles in their way. It's a bit of an adrenaline boost for the whole company just to see a different industry and different flavor of clients and placement
mm.
stories. So, and I'm very grateful those guys have remained with us, but given themselves greater scope or range of experience for their
Nice.
businesses.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing well, it sounds like Titan is a place that potentially, if you're trusted and you're performing well, you can have a big ceiling, right, to do your own thing. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. And we don't have like I was kind of quite transparent earlier, but we don't have like a business plan etched in stone, and we have to stick to it. It's more a case of opportunistic growth, and that's really how we built out green tech and biz innovation. It's been just sort of, well, I won't say fell into our lap, but it was more guys that wanted to do a bit more, have a bit more kind of space to grow.
mhm,
And the same applies for future areas we might target as well. And it really depends on the person.
mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, the I think variety is the spice of life, and you're someone who is keeping it fresh and interesting on LinkedIn, as well. You know, you have your very unique 50 lunches.
Well, thanks for noticing. It's been a fun initiative. Like anything, you kind of you launch, you don't know how it's going to be received and whatnot, but it's been kind of I've been pleasantly surprised with the traffic and
Mm,
the interest in it.
hmm.
So yeah, I guess just some background to that. So yeah, I'm from Australia originally, and I had some. I went back to Australia in 2023, just to deal with some family health issues, and I was there for 10 months, and that's my first kind of long period. Like 2 decades, I was in recruitment, and at the desk sort of every day. Just sort of going through the gears. So that was my first, I guess, breakaway from coming into the office, and so it was, and it wasn't a sabbatical. I was still, working. It's 1 hour time difference, so it's very easy to kind of adjust. But when I was back there, I was just thinking like, when I come back to Tokyo and sort of back into the office, I didn't want to have that feeling of just being a hamster on the wheel. I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I think that also ties into long-term recruiters or veterans. You kind of have to sort of reinvent yourself from time to time just to keep it fresh. And so yeah, I spent a lot of time sort of just reflecting on what value I had with my clients, the candidate base I had, and my role within Titan as well. So I sort of thought, why not sort of leverage the network I built up in the healthcare sector for over a significant period of time. And so I thought about that, the leadership or the 50 lunches, 50 leaders program, purely based upon the fact I think that sometimes in Japan you hear, and this isn't industry agnostic, I think there's this sort of top-down view of leadership in Japan. If you're a staff level member, you look up at the shacho and there's like 100 layers between you, and they feel like demigods at sometimes. So I kind of wanted to break down a little bit of that, I don't know, behind sort of the unreachable kind of senior guys in the companies. I used LinkedIn as a platform to kind of launch this, which also took a lot to overcome because I guess early on in my recruitment days, I was sort of, I don't know, I hate to use the expression old school, but it was sort of seen like, don't be on LinkedIn. That's sort of low hanging fruit. And healthcare sector only has 4% of people have profiles, and it's a bit of a time suck. And maybe I naively and stubbornly kind of still viewed LinkedIn as such a kind of a channel of that. So it took a little bit of kind of breaking down this kind of stigma or this old stubborn mentality that you can use LinkedIn as a quite an effective channel. So yeah, I came back to Japan, tapped a few of the senior healthcare leaders I knew in my network on the shoulder, and just said, "Hey, I'm thinking about launching this leadership series. It's got nothing to do with recruitment. It's all about sort of your philosophy on what makes a good leader, and just some kind of nuggets of wisdom that you could perhaps share." And then, yeah, I remember sort of hovering over about to click the mouse to sort of post the first one. And I was, even 20 years in, you still have this kind of self doubt, especially I was going into a world of social media, and I'm a bit of an old head, I suppose. And I was like, shit, what if this really flops? I was trying to kind of summon the courage to do it. It's
Hmm.
funny how we got candidates we're supporting for career change and whatnot, and they have to take the plunge and be brave. And here I am kind of questioning whether, the fear of doing something and stepping out into the unknown. So um, I
Yeah.
launched it, and it seems to have resonated well with the market. It is a bit different. I think traffic early on was probably more, attracted to the ridiculous range of Borat t-shirts I was wearing. But hey, anything to get people talking. The whole great success mantra sort of ties in to the leadership series thread. It's been fun. Piled through the first 50, and now 75 in, I think, to the yeah. So I'll probably stop at 100 and just regroup, but seems to have struck a chord with the market. Appreciated people's interest in it. Not everyone's a fan, but hey, you can't please everyone. So I
Hmm.
think there's something here that's a bit different.
Nice. No, it's it's fun to see. It's interesting that you had that kind of moment. I'm back in Australia, 10 months, not in Japan, and kind of getting a chance to regroup, like you say. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people in the industry that are leaders and veterans don't really take the time to do this. It's usually maybe like a couple of week vacation at the most, and they're
Yeah.
probably working for half of that or more. So it's
Yeah.
cool to see what can happen.
Yeah.
We can all be creative and approach things different ways. But I think what I'm really curious about, and probably what a lot of people are curious about, is what is the actual benefit to your business? How is it actually
Mm.
served you to do this?
Yeah, so I mean, early on, I mean, when I kind of initially started this program, it was a way of sort of showing some of our younger or lesser experienced guys that there's a bit of a I don't know, there's a bit of a COVID slumber. I think people were sort of still in this kind of frame of mind that face-to-face meetings are kind of people are still worried about kind of the pandemic. And I don't know. I just think there was a bit of a wake up call that we needed to sort of be a lot more proactive. And people that
Mm,
had started recruitment anytime 2020 onwards, they weren't really familiar with what recruitment used to be like. And I don't want to be one of
hmm
those grizzled vets talking about the good old days, but it really was chalk and cheese. Everything used to be done face to face. Used to always go out, prep guys for interviews face to face, have coffees on the way to work with guys. It's just used to be a lot more, face to face. And Japan's a very high touch sort of, market. So I think that was sort of lost on a lot of people. And I think that I wanted to sort of show that, have you asked? Have you actually, you know,
Mm,
connected with clients and candidates and whatnot and saying, I'd like to meet face to face. So I was sort of trying to, I guess, rally the troops and let them know that people are
yeah.
responsive, but you just simply got in a bad habit of not asking. You're just resorting to a video
hmm
call or a phone call, and it's the easiest option for them to say yes to. So that was one
hmm
of the initial pushes that I wanted this kind of series to, I guess, illustrate that simply be a bit more proactive with your FaceTime.
hmm So it
So that was a
started
good
off
knock
with
on.
just a "I told you so" kind of. No, I mean
Yeah.
it's really leading from the front is what it is, right? It's really putting, what you're telling other people to do and doing it yourself
Mm.
and then posting it publicly. So it's pretty brave of you to do both of those things, I think. Very cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the compliment. Yeah, I think that it's sort of had a trickle down effect. I don't know if it was through fear or laziness or just I don't know, people got a little bit kind of lackadaisical with their recruitment methods. It has had a good knock on effect in that sense that a lot of the team now, a lot of our Titan members are a lot more eager to sort of get out and
Nice.
bringing a lot of these senior guys to the table, the individuals I've been sitting down with for these lunches. I mean, they're all off, they're all people of influence in the sense that they've got their hiring managers or their senior level in their organization. So just interacting with them, if you're asking the right questions and whatnot, there's always little tidbits to kind of to walk away with. And you know the leadership series really disarms them because you're not really talking about recruitment. Naturally, I never take my recruiter hat off. I've been doing it 20 years. Naturally, there's some discussion that leads to headcount discussion or future hiring and whatnot, but I don't, that's not the front of the, it's not the, the purpose of the lunch. Naturally,
hmm
discussion does gravitate to that. I
mm
mean, yeah, naturally, there's been a lot of new clients signed. There's been, big
Wow.
searches won. That's just a nice knock-on effect from the series. So
Active, it sounds like not only internally to kind of raise some morale and show people it's
mm,
possible, but also externally to kind of get some more exposure or even just have an excuse to be networking with these people. And everyone
yeah,
likes to be, you know, not everyone, but most people
mm,
like to be, talked to and, someone's interested in their story. This is what we're doing right now, right? So,
yeah, no, exactly. And I was quite humbled to sort of get your invite. I think it's nice to sort of you still have kind of some reservations about really do I have something to say? Yeah, again, I
mm,
appreciate the invite. One interesting thing from the lunch series is it's kind of not it's like a domino effect. Yeah, I did that, and then I started a lot of the GMs I was meeting with. They were all kind of consistently saying the same thing when they attend conferences or symposia or trade events. They tend to get swarmed by everyone on the floor. So I was getting this continual, consistent thread from these guys at these lunches saying it'd be great to have a forum or an evening where I can just sort of liaise with other GMs and just because they're all going through whether you're 10 people company or 1,000 people company. A lot of these guys at the very top, it can sometimes be quite a feeling of isolation and a bit lonely in the sense that you can't really, complain up or whatever, or sorry, shouldn't complain down. they don't really have a I guess a community amongst themselves where they can sort of just like share experiences and battle stories and have sounding boards. So that
Mm.
kind of led me to sort of create this President's Club, which we've done 4 of these sessions now. And yeah, I guess the only criteria is you have to be sort of general manager or, managing director of the company. And it's all healthcare related still. So it's people that all have a lot in common in the same industry. And that's been great. It's just, again, wasn't set up with any real kind of recruitment angle. It was just a matter of put all these great leaders into a room um, with no agenda. And yeah, we've done a number of these events now. Started with 8, the first one, just to make sure there's proof of concept there. And the last one we did had 24 members. And
Wow.
I'm doing one again in about a month from now. We'll sort of shoot for 30 people. And yeah, I think that it's been quite warmly received because, again, there's not
Mm.
really anything else like it in the market. And I think that differentiator it appeals to people. So yeah, it's been that all stemmed from sort of the lunch series. So there's all these little spin-offs or offshoots of I
Mm.
um yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so all these little innovations that are coming just because you you decided to take a step back, or I guess you're forced maybe to take a step back and look at these things. So um
Yeah,
yeah.
it's stepping out of your comfort zone. I know it's a bit kind of cliche, but yeah, I'm glad I did it, and certainly not everything's been smooth sailing. There's always a few little creases you got
Mm.
to iron out. No, by and large, it's been a great sort of project, or both of these, the
Hmm.
President's Club and the Lunch Series. And you recruiters, like, whether you've got 1 month experience or 20 years, you still have to kind of muster the motivation on a Sunday night. You look at your week ahead, and if it always just feels like much of the same, you sort of it's easy to kind of have your morale or your energy levels dip. So when you sort of, I see now, I've got a plan for this next President's Club. I've got 2 lunches this week, and I've got to prep for that. It just kind of, I don't know, it just infuses, it galvanizes your schedule almost, and that's kind of given me a
Mm.
little shot in the arm. Whereas maybe I didn't have that sort of when I headed back to Australia. I kind of needed to sort of, I know, do something a bit different upon my return, which I've done the last sort of year and 3 months. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, you're talking about the hamster wheel. I think that recruitment can feel very repetitive, although, every single day is different and you might have a crazy busy, exciting day and unexpected things are happening, but it can feel a little bit repetitive, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so it's cool to have these other things to look forward to. And I think some companies are worried a little bit that this is going to take away from the meat and potatoes that that are holding the business together. But
Yeah.
I guess what have you found in your experience? Has it taken away from your productivity of setting meetings and sending more CVs or
No, no, you're 100% right, Levi. If anything, I want to kind of dispel a myth here that, just because you're carving out time in your schedule to do these other things doesn't mean it's at the expense of your work. Early on, I had a little bit of some reservations about this. I'm dedicating a lot of this time to these other kind of ventures. Will it actually yield results? I had a few, I won't say naysayers, but it's like, well, is it collecting any wins? It took a little while to sort of get a few things coming through, but once, and I won't say the floodgates open, once a few projects started to come through, then we could sort of see the big picture, and it's sort of snowballed since then. So I
Hmm.
think that dedicating time to something, it's like a bit of a passion project as well. You find that it sort of gives you energy to then focus on your other tasks.
Hmm.
As you said, the meat and potatoes of recruitment.
Hmm.
I could be an idiot running around town in a Borat t-shirt doing lunches, but if it wasn't for any, if there's nothing produced from that, then I just look like a clown. So I think
Hmm.
internally people have seen the results it's yielded, and yeah, and it's not just one thing. It's quite a substantial volume of stuff coming in now. So it took a little while to kind of,
Nice.
get the engine revved. And I think it's not just this leadership thing. It's, I think, anyone that wants to do something that may be outside the ABC steps of recruitment, if you are energized by that, then that positivity will flow into your regular work anyway. So it won't make you any less productive. Theoretically, it should
Hmm.
actually make you even better. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me when I was in my old company, I have a lot less experience than you, so I can't really say, but I do remember working on projects and whatever the project was, whether it was like internal training, getting our whole training manual documented and put online, or to start a newsletter for some candidates and clients to keep them updated on the market. And these things definitely made me feel like I'm getting more energy rather than just purely doing the similar tasks. And I notice this with training people as well. If you bring someone in and you just have them headhunt all day long, they can do, probably they're going to get to around 100 calls.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really change if you give them an hour or two of even doing something slightly different, right? I think all the leaders really can see, you give them some CV formatting to do for an hour, give their brain a little bit of a break, and then all of a sudden they still hit the 100 calls that you
Yeah.
wanted them to hit. Um,
Yeah.
and if you just have them doing that all day, then they just only get to 100. So there's something about like the, reduction maybe in your energy if you don't switch it up a little bit. So
Yeah.
it's cool to hear you corroborating that as well.
Yeah. And I think that also ties into sort of, I guess, what you call outside work or extracurricular hobbies that people have. Some of the best recruiters I know or have known been like Andy, for example, in our green tech business, he does ultra marathons, and you kind of go, well, he'd be pretty burned out when he comes to the office on the Monday, and it's the complete opposite. Like he will go run 100 miles, but
Hmm.
he'll be there still like with energy just to burn. So it's not necessarily you use all your fuel tickets, so to speak. It's like these
Hmm.
weekends are to recharge for sure. You can sit at home watch Netflix all day, or you can go to gym and pump iron for a few hours. Everyone has their own kind of outlets, but the people that I've sort of really identified over the years that have been amazing billers and have such a great balance of work and sort of their home life and whatnot, they're the ones that are just have these insane hobbies, but it just gives them I don't know, fuel, I suppose, and they come into the office and they're incredibly effective. But they sort
Hmm.
of envy those guys, and yeah, I can think of a good half dozen people over the years that have these outside the office hobbies that just think would burn them out, but it does the complete opposite.
Hmm. And I mean, even within like obviously the hobbies, and I want to ask you about your hobbies in a moment, but just one last thing that came up for me is I read this book by the someone who was working at Google. I think it's called Work Rules. And basically, they talked about how they would give the employees, even during working hours, I think it was 10% or 20% of their time to just do something completely different.
Yeah.
Obviously for the business, but just something different in their daily tasks. And then they found that all these huge innovations, I think some like Google Maps or one of these hugely successful products was developed off of giving some time to be creative. So yeah, if your KPIs are so strict, maybe, or if you're so micromanaging of people's times, you don't give them the space that they need, then it can even detract, I find, and it doesn't allow for innovation like what you've had. So I mean, for me, taking time away, taking some space is the only way to kind of produce more creativity. So, but for you and taking that time outside of work, for your hobbies, what is something that you do?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I love the outdoors, and I started cycling about about a dozen years ago. So that's kind of my outlet. Sort of green therapy. I love getting out in the mountains, and I've been living in Japan a long time, and I sort of think there's so many wonderful kind of mountain roads out there that are all unexplored. So I just like getting on my bike, and it's sort of a bit of a it's going to declutter the mind, and that's sort of been my I don't know, a dozen years ago, sort of similar to when we sort of launched Titan. I think it was a good way just to kind of, mentally clear the head on a Saturday morning, get out at sort of 4 in the morning in summer, and you're back before lunch. I've got a young family as well, so I didn't want to be too absent. So, yeah, I think without my bike, now I've got multiple bikes now, but that's kind of been a great, I guess, not late life. I wasn't that old when I started it, but it's been a good outlet. And that sort of ties into hiking as well. So just to kind of break it up a little bit. So I think
Mm,
getting the kids out of the city on weekends just to kind of get out to see some trails. It's they did that for 10 months back in Australia when we were living there, and I kind of wanted to, continue that sort of outdoor setup on weekends. So getting out of the big smoke is sort of the way we spend most weekends, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Hmm. Wonderful. I mean, it's interesting that I've had a lot of people on the podcast so far, or a decent amount, and I don't think anyone has said that they like to go and party and drink on the weekends. I mean, maybe they wouldn't reveal this kind of thing, but I'm surprised
Yeah.
also from multiple Australians, and that
Mm.
hasn't really come up at all. I don't know. I think it's probably fine in moderation, but how do you see that?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, you know, early on in my recruitment days, I think I kind of put my liver, through the ringer, like a lot of kind of guys that are starting out. You kind of feel compelled to drink several nights a week, whether it be with colleagues or candidates or clients and whatnot. But
Hmm.
I don't know, with responsibilities, you have to kind of rein it in a little bit. So I think I kind of value my evening time now massively, and it's very rare where you sort of see me out. I mean, early on, it seemed to sort of be the obligation you kind of had to. But
Hmm.
I think if you're not getting wiser the older you get, then God help you.
So just to start wrapping things up a bit, I'm curious your advice for young recruiters out there. You've seen people who've made it and people who haven't made it, and maybe talk about what the difference is, or yeah, some tips that you have for young people.
Yeah, it's always a good question, and you'd think I'd have like a real, you know, dynamite answer here, but I think that if I've learned anything as well, especially over the last year and a half, and again, I was a bit of a relic of the past, a bit stubborn with my recruitment kind of ways, but creating your own kind of identity, and what I mean by that is really defining your brand, and ultimately, when you work in recruitment, it's not so much the company that's printed on your Meishi that your clients and candidates remember. It's who you are, I guess. So in years you build your network, they don't remember the logo on your Mishi. It's all about who you are as a person and how you treated them or the service you provided. So I think really focusing on kind of carving out your own brand, having your clients and candidates, and understand what you stand for. So I think really focusing the lens on defining what it is that who you are and what your recruitment principles
Hmm.
are. So really carving out your own kind of brand. And secondly, I think just I touched a little bit on it earlier, Levi. I think that people are so reluctant to sort of get out and be proactive with their interactions. Everyone's very comfortable behind a keyboard, but ultimately, what sort of kept my fires burning all the time I've been in recruitment is the interactions is what really energizes you. Getting out there and actually meeting people face to face, just forming those relationships. It's super critical, and it's sort of in lean times, though that network that you've kind of created that kind of sees you through sort of so those tough periods. And in recruitment, it's not always smooth sailing, right? So I just think building that network can only really be done through like as much kind of high touch communication as possible. For younger recruiters, don't get too comfortable camped behind your monitor and your keyboard there. Really put yourself out there. And they're the kind of relationships and connections that will kind of stand the test of time and really
Hmm.
create, much stronger, um, I don't know, the bones of a recruitment career. So
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call them sage words whatsoever. I'm sure it's probably been repeated from other guests, but it's not rocket science. I think that if you can do
Hmm.
those two things well, then that'll sort of give you a strong base for the future.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting coming from yourself because you're kind of marrying what this technology of LinkedIn and social media can do for the business, right? What it maybe should be doing with the old school style of going and meeting people in person, right? And then and arranging this president's club and having this come out of it too. So you're not just relying on this to replace this, you're actually using this to enhance each other. So that very, very cool to see.
Yeah, I like to think so. And I think old school recruiters kind of get mired in the old ways. But if you're not kind of open to change and innovation and whatnot, by no means have I unlocked the algorithm. It's just been a fun project that's had a good kind of knock on effect. But I don't know. I think it speaks to a bigger, I don't know, a greater. We talked about this a little bit earlier offline. I think there is it's an interesting feeling in the recruitment market in Japan at the moment. It's, for the first time I can recall, there seems to be a greater sense of kind of community, and I think that your podcast certainly kind of tip into that bucket as well. It's nice to see that there's a bit more. I don't know, a greater sense of we're all kind of
Camaraderie.
recruiters. We're all this is a bit of an affliction amongst recruiters that like where everyone's the enemy. You know, we have to be competitive because it's sales essentially, but not at the expense of
Hmm.
being an asshole. So I think with I don't know, I can think of many examples. I think like what Stephen Lee's doing over there in at Robert Half with his cyber kind of community podcast that David Sweet's been doing with Focus Core, Axel from Inner Hive, even Ryan Shepherd over at IGF, and he wrote a goddamn book. I mean, that's super impressive. It's like
Hmm.
it seems to be a little bit more of a general sense, and maybe this comes with age, and you know, hopefully you get a bit mellowed in your older recruitment years. That there's a greater sense of like do good and general sort of
Mm.
you know not being as kind of enclosed with your thoughts and
Hmm.
yeah, and if we can all raise the kind of raise the bar together, then I think we'll all win. And again, that is a little bit kind of you know campfire kumbaya kind of message, but I genuinely believe it,
Yeah.
and I've sort of seen firsthand some of the good things, just sort of connecting people and whatnot, and other recruiters, bringing them in just a bit closer so we can sort of share best practices and battle stories. Because I think you'll find we've all got a lot more in common than what we realize, and it's not all about you know everyone out there is your enemy unless they're kind of in your camp. So yeah,
Mm.
hopefully your podcast series, I'm sure it has a lot more rope, a lot more longevity, and curious to see other members you're kind of bringing on that hopefully believe in this sort of I know philosophy as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's probably not good and bad companies out there. It's probably just something that's good for you, right, is not good for me necessarily, or vice versa. So I'm hoping to try to get all the different recruitment companies out there, featured on this, and I guess maybe taking those like-minded people as well and building a community around them. Definitely yourself, being one of them, and you seem like an extremely humble recruiter as well. I cannot picture you being an asshole at all. I don't know how you were when you were younger, but definitely it's refreshing to talk to people like yourself in the industry. Um, and I think there's more and more people that are seeing that you can be, um, a little bit more open, a little bit more relaxed, and you can still work really hard. You can still deliver results. And at the end of the day, why not?
Yeah, 100%. I think we're on the same page on that regard, and even what you've done. I mean, stepping away takes courage, and you know, it's not everyone is kind of ready to do that. And I think I was sort of on this path mentally for about 19 years, and it just happened through a sort of life event where I had to return to Australia, that sort of spawned or created this kind of a new direction. So you know, people
Mhm.
arrive at different points of their career at different times, and I think there's a lot more good out there in recruitment, which often we always get tarred with the same brush.
Mhm.
But I think there's a bit of a new wave of sort of and a collective
Mhm.
thinking that we can tap into, and I think your platform here certainly helps sort of create that exposure. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and I was
Yeah,
hoping you're going to
likewise.
jam with I thought you were going to bring a ukulele on the call at the start there. You could maybe lead into each podcast with a uke solo. Anyway, that's just not one of the crazy ideas.
Maybe that's an interesting one. Um, yeah, I'll get practicing maybe some riffs or something. But
Yeah.
good to speak with you, sir. Thanks for your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Levi. Much appreciated. And yeah, thanks for your time and sort of hearing what I had to say. Much appreciated.
Likewise. All right, all the best.